One of the most painful realizations a human being can have does not arrive loudly. It doesn't come with shouting, insults, or dramatic rejection. It comes quietly, almost politely. It arrives when you notice the meeting still happened without you. The work continued. The messages stopped coming. Someone else stepped into your position, answered the questions, filled the silence, and nothing collapsed. No emergency, no chaos, no one ran looking for you. And in that moment, something inside you breaks, not because you lost something, but because you feel like you never mattered enough to be missed. That is the shock. That is the wound. Feeling replaceable doesn't attack your ego, it attacks your identity. It whispers a dangerous thought: if I disappear, the world goes on just fine. And once that thought settles in your mind, it begins to poison everything. Your confidence, your ambition, your willingness to speak, your courage to try again. You don't stop because you are incapable. You stop because you are afraid that effort will only confirm your invisibility. Psychologically, this pain is not small. Neuroscience shows that social rejection and feelings of being unnecessary activate the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Your nervous system does not know the difference between being physically injured and being emotionally discarded. For most of human history, being unneeded meant being abandoned, and abandonment meant death. So when you feel replaceable today, your body reacts as if your survival is under threat. Your chest tightens, your energy drops, your motivation shuts down. You begin withdrawing, not because you don't care, but because your system is trying to protect you from further pain. And society doesn't talk about this. Instead, it tells you to work harder, prove your worth, be more useful. But that advice quietly reinforces the very wound that's destroying you. It teaches you that your value must be earned again and again, that your existence must justify itself, that rest, presence, and being are luxuries reserved only for the irreplaceable. And so you start living like you're on probation in your own life, constantly performing, constantly fearing replacement, constantly exhausted. But here is the brutal truth most people never hear. The world is structured to replace roles, not humans. But you were taught to confuse the two. Jobs are replaceable, positions are replaceable, functions are replaceable. But when you tie your entire sense of worth to those things, you make yourself feel disposable. And that is not humility, that is conditioning. You were trained to believe that if someone else can do what you do, then you are nothing special. But uniqueness was never about tasks. It was always about depth. And depth is something the world cannot mass produce. Here is the lie that silently destroys millions of people while they are still breathing: if I am not useful, I am not worthy. That belief turns your life into a transaction. You stop seeing yourself as a human being and start seeing yourself as a tool. And tools are only valued when they are being used. So the moment you are not called, not chosen, not asked, not required, you feel like you failed at existence itself. This is why feeling unneeded hurts more than failure. Failure still means you tried. Feeling unneeded feels like you were never even considered. And over time, this belief rewires your behavior. You stop asking for help because you don't want to be a burden. You stop sharing your ideas because you assume no one cares. You stop dreaming big because dreaming feels foolish when you believe you're easily replaceable. You shrink, not because you are weak, but because you are trying to survive emotional erasure. This is especially devastating for people who were praised only for performance. If your value growing up came from being useful, responsible, productive, or strong, then being unneeded feels like betrayal. You gave everything. And now you're invisible. And instead of questioning the system, you question yourself. What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't they need me? But here is the psychological truth that changes everything. Your pain is not evidence of your insignificance. It is evidence of misplaced identity. You built your sense of self around roles that were never meant to hold your entire worth. And when those roles change, your identity collapsed with them. The world benefits from people who believe they are replaceable. Replaceable people don't demand respect. They don't set boundaries. They don't walk away from toxic environments. They overwork. They overgive. They stay silent. They accept less because they believe they can be swapped out at any moment. And the tragedy is this: the more you try to be needed, the more power you give away. Needing to be needed is emotional dependency. It puts your worth in other people's hands. And the moment they let go, you fall apart. That's not strength, that's captivity. But here's the reversal most people never reach. The moment you stop begging to be needed is the moment you start becoming dangerous in the best way. Because when you no longer need validation to exist, you begin to operate from choice instead of fear. And fear has been the only thing keeping you small. Now listen carefully, because this is where the transformation begins. You were never meant to be needed. You were meant to be whole. The strongest people in history were not defined by how necessary they were. They were defined by how grounded they were. They did not collapse when ignored. They did not disappear when replaced. They did not beg to matter. They decided they mattered, and that decision changed everything. When you stop asking, do they need me? And start asking, who am I when no one is watching? Your entire internal world shifts. You stop performing. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing replacement, because replacement only threatens those who confuse usefulness with worth. This is where you rebuild yourself. Not by proving anything to anyone, but by becoming internally anchored. You develop skills because you respect yourself, not because you fear being irrelevant. You speak because you have something to say, not because you need attention. You walk away from environments that drain you, not because you are arrogant, but because you are no longer desperate to be chosen. And slowly, quietly, something shocking happens. Your presence gains weight. People may replace your role, but they feel the difference. Not immediately, not loudly, but deeply. Because depth cannot be faked, and depth cannot be replaced. And even if they never notice, this is the final liberation, you no longer collapse, because your worth is no longer external. You don't need to be needed to feel alive. You don't need to be chosen to feel valuable. You don't need permission to exist fully. You become someone who would rise even in silence. Someone who would build even without applause. Someone who would stand firm even if no one clapped. And that is the most dangerous kind of person in the world, a person who knows their value without witnesses. Remember this for the rest of your life. You are replaceable as a function, but you are irreplaceable as a force. The day you stop confusing the two is the day you stop feeling unneeded and start becoming unbreakable. There is a phase people never talk about. The phase where you don't collapse dramatically, you don't scream, you don't quit loudly. You simply start disappearing. You show up physically, but you are gone internally. Your eyes lose hunger. Your voice loses conviction. Your posture changes. You stop volunteering ideas. You stop challenging people. You stop asserting boundaries. Not because you don't have opinions, but because somewhere deep inside you've accepted a devastating belief it wouldn't matter anyway. This is the real danger of feeling replaceable. It doesn't destroy you all at once. It erodes you slowly, quietly, day by day, until the person you used to be feels like someone you once knew. You begin negotiating with mediocrity. You tell yourself, I'll just stay quiet. I'll just blend in. I won't rock the boat. And the tragedy is not that people overlook you. The tragedy is that you start overlooking yourself. You abandon parts of your personality just to avoid the pain of being ignored again. You stop taking risks because risk requires belief. You stop setting goals because goals require hope. And hope feels dangerous when you think you're unnecessary. This is how potential dies, not through failure, but through emotional resignation. This is where many people unknowingly enter survival mode. They don't live to expand. They live to avoid pain. They become agreeable, predictable, safe. And the world rewards that at first. You get less conflict, less pressure, less rejection, but you also get less respect, less growth, less life. Because the moment you try to make yourself easy to replace, you guarantee that you will be. Not because you lack value, but because you stopped expressing it. And here's the most brutal truth. No one comes to rescue you from this phase. No one notices you fading. The world does not pause to ask why you got quieter, why you stopped trying, why you dimmed your fire. It simply adjusts to the smaller version of you. And if you stay here long enough, one day you wake up and realize the scariest thing of all. You don't even remember who you were before you shrank. There comes a moment, if you're lucky, when numbness turns into anger. Not rage at others, rage at yourself. Rage at the fact that you abandoned your own standards just to feel accepted. Rage at how small you allowed your life to become. Rage at how often you stayed silent when you should have spoken. This is not a comfortable phase, but it is a necessary one. Because anger, when directed inward with honesty, becomes fuel, you begin to see the pattern clearly. You weren't ignored because you lacked value. You were ignored because you stopped standing in it. You weren't replaced because you were weak. You were replaced because you became indistinguishable. You tried so hard not to be a burden that you erased your presence. And the realization hits like a punch to the chest. No one took your power. You handed it over willingly, piece by piece. Every time you chose safety over truth, this is where excuses die. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop blaming people. You stop blaming timing. You see the real enemy clearly. Fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being seen and still not chosen. And you finally understand something life-changing, being ignored while authentic hurts once, being invisible while pretending hurts forever. This phase is dangerous because it tempts you to swing to the opposite extreme, to seek validation aggressively, to demand recognition, to prove your worth loudly. But that is still dependency. That is still slavery to approval. The real transformation happens when you don't try to force importance, but decide it internally and live accordingly. This is where discipline replaces desperation, where self-respect replaces people-pleasing, where silence becomes intentional instead of fearful, and slowly your energy changes. Not louder, not aggressive, just solid, unapologetic, grounded. This is the phase few ever reach. The phase where you are no longer driven by the need to be necessary. You stop measuring your worth by how often you're called, asked, chosen, or praised. You operate from a deeper place, a quieter place, a place where your value is not up for negotiation. And this changes how you move through the world completely. You don't chase relevance anymore. You build substance. You don't fear replacement anymore. You refine mastery. You don't beg for space anymore. You occupy it naturally. And here's the paradox that shocks most people. The less you need to be needed, the more impactful you become. Because your actions are no longer contaminated by desperation. Your words carry weight because they aren't trying to impress. Your presence feels strong because it doesn't seek permission. People may not always understand you, but they feel you. And feeling is stronger than approval. You become someone who can stand alone without collapsing, someone who can walk away without bitterness, someone who can be ignored without self-destruction. And that is real power, because the world can replace your position, but it cannot replace your center. It cannot replace your perspective. It cannot replace your depth, earned through pain, self-confrontation, and rebuilding. And even if no one ever applauds this version of you, even if the world never acknowledges how far you've come, you no longer need external confirmation to keep going. Because you know the truth now, you were never replaceable as a human being. You were only replaceable when you abandoned yourself, and you will never do that again.